Hello and welcome back to Train Signal. We'll be going through the lesson today, maintaining desktop pools out of the VMware View 5 Essentials training course. In this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at user entitlements, what that means and how we actually get users to be able to use a new pool that we've created or set of desktops. Then also we're going to be taking a look at the three composer operations, the three R's, as I like to refer to them. Then we'll see how to be able to edit those pools once they've been created, how to go back and modify and make changes and what can and can't be changed. Then we'll also look at managing user sessions and what options we have for being able to communicate or take care of the user there. And then finally we'll take a look at the desktop pool management demonstration so that you can actually see this in the lab environment and see how we go about enabling all these. So for user entitlements. So first off, you're going to need to entitle a user before they're going to be able to access a desktop in a pool. So a pool can be enabled for provisioning and it can be enabled for use, but until we actually have a user account or a group account that's been given access to that particular desktop pool, they're not going to be able to get into it. Nothing will be able to happen. It's not going to be functional or usable for them. The pool can be created, it can be ready to go, but until we actually have given that access out, it's not going to be available for them. And you'll see a nice warning as we go through the demonstration in the View Manager server that shows you that, hey, wait a minute, buddy, you need to entitle this pool first. So kind of gives you a nice little alert mechanism. Now, as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, access can be granted individually or by group. Ideally, you want to do this by group instead of by individual, but if you've got a small environment and you just need a few individuals to have access to the pool, that can be helpful from the View Manager server, so that way you can see who actually directly has entitlement to that pool. But for most organizations, and especially larger organizations, you're definitely going to want to make the use of groups. So that way that's going to make your life easier. You're not going to have to go back in and add or remove users anytime there's a change to the pool. Because in those larger environments it can be a lot more dynamic as far as who needs access to that pool. So having groups based on the actual groups of users that would need access to that particular pool is a lot more helpful. So now we also have something called restricted entitlements. Now, they limit pool access to specific View connection servers. So let me kind of paint this out for you and how this works, because it can be a little confusing just by the verbiage that's used. So essentially what we do is we create tags on connection servers, or at least we have the option to. By default, you don't have to have tags created, but you can go in and edit the settings of a connection server and put tags, which are just essentially text strings, on a specific connection server. And then when we actually have a pool, we can assign those tags to a pool to limit the way that pool can be accessed as far as which connection servers are going to be able to accept requests for that particular pool. So with that, a tag can be something as simple as inside, outside. So I might have two separate tags that say, if I use the tag inside, I'm only going to use those connection servers that are on the inside, or outside, I'm only going to use another specific set of outside connection servers that may be in my DMZ. So it's just essentially a way to, you could think of it as load balancing your traffic, or forcing pool traffic to go down a certain set of View connection servers. So Composer. When we look at Composer, like I mentioned earlier, we have the three R's, and we're going to go through each one of these in turn. Refresh, recompose, and rebalance. And these guys are really at the heart of giving some real great operational savings back to the systems administrator to really help you maintain your environment effectively, to limit the growth of temporary files, stagnating your SAN, the ability to kind of balance out your load between your data stores, and also just to be able to handle patch management. So let's go through these one by one and take a look at what each one of these does. So in the refresh operation, essentially what this does is it returns the virtual desktop back to its original state. So all changes that were in the Delta disk are eliminated. So if you'll remember before, when we actually have a view composer image that's created, we have the replica image, which is a read-only image, and then off of that is the delta disk, which contains all the unique characteristics particular to that individual disk. So things like computer name, IP address, SID, all those types of things are contained in that delta disk. And then beyond that, what is also contained in there are any other additional writes, anything that's written out, temp files, log files, you name it. So anything that's not redirected to another location, as in the user's profile or to a persistent disk, any of those changes to the C drive are these changes which are going to be eliminated. So for the most part, 95% of the time, these are going to be things you're not going to need or need access to, so they're easily, thrown away. You are going to want to make sure you test that and make sure that there aren't things that aren't being written to the C drive or in specific locations that you do need to keep. Now, along with this, if you've redirected to a disposable disk, so that disposable disk is deleted and recreated from scratch. So if you haven't done that, then this doesn't take effect. But if you have had your temp files and temporary internet files redirected to that specific disposable disk, this gets wiped and recreated on when we do a refresh operation. Now, refresh operations can also be on demand, so you can just go in and actually take care of that yourself individually. You can have that scheduled as part of the pool. When you pool settings, you can specify that at a certain period of time this refresh operation is going to take place, or you can have it set up so that whenever a user logs off or when a link clone reaches a specific size, that these refresh operations are going to take place. Now, when this happens, it's going to force users off with a message and a timeout, so that way their disk is refreshed. It's a fairly quick operation, not as lengthy as a recompose, but it does take some time. It's going to take whatever that timeout value is that has been set on the connection server individually, and then the time it takes for the actual refresh operation itself. Now, if you are working with local mode desktops, they must be checked in order to be able to be refreshed. So some of the use cases that comes up for using refresh operations is maintaining consistent and automated floating pools. So this keeps these pools clean, consistent, and just to a pristine state. So at all times you're dealing with a pool that's pretty much the same. It's not stagnating, and it's not growing with other files over time. So it eliminates changes that can cause user problems, right? Again, just like any other brand new desktop system, whenever you get a brand new desktop, it's just rocking, it's fast, it works exactly the way you want it to. This kind of helps that same way. This is kind of like resetting the defaults, as if you were going through a fresh new ghost image of a new system or getting a brand new system for the first time. So this gives you that kind of a pristine state. And as I just kind of mentioned, it allows you to easily return to a clean, known state during application testing, right? So if I need to go back and test an application, this will get me back to original defaults, right? This will take me back to my original image as it was when I first deployed the pool. So it gives me a known good state to be able to go back to. Right on, Composer Operations Recompose. So this is my favorite from an OpEx perspective, because this is just a time saver and just real advantageous from a sysadmin's point of view. So what this allows me to be able to do is relink my desktop to a new parent snapshot. So going back to our concept here of we've got this replica and all these link clone delta disks that are hanging off of that replica disk. When I want to do a recompose, this gives me the option of going back to my original parent VM, which is not the replica. So there's no relationship other than that this is where the replica was cloned from initially. I can power up that original parent VM, make whatever changes that I want to, and create a new snapshot. And then the recompose operation is essentially relinking this desktop pool to the new snapshot. So whatever changes have happened from the original snapshot to the new snapshot, it's going to create a new replica based on that parent snapshot, and that's going to be my new pool, those new changes. So all changes in the Delta disposable disks are eliminated. So just like with a refresh, the same thing. Those are they're going away because we're actually instantiating a new replica. So it's going to not only need to do a refresh operation is pretty quick because it's just having to essentially reset back to the original defaults on those. But a recompose takes a bit more time because it's actually having to do a full clone to create a brand new replica and all the Delta disks associated with that and disposable disks if you're using those as well. So a little bit lengthier in time, but all those changes will also go away. So this doesn't affect any persistent disks. So if you're using persistent disks, those will stay intact and will not be harmed by this operation. It doesn't touch them whatsoever. So one thing you can't do, which would be nice, but you can't recompose from one OS to another. So I can't take a parent VM that was running Windows XP and have a pool running on Windows XP, go back to that parent VM, upgrade the VM, take a new snapshot under Windows 7, and then recompose to Windows 7. Not really going to work. The main reason for that is profile information. So especially with persistent disks, because those aren't being affected at all and aren't being changed or modified or updated. So your profile isn't being updated with that as well. So can't really do that. It would be nice, but sorry. So just like refresh operations, it's going to force users off with a message and a timeout value that you have configured. So again, like I mentioned before, this takes significantly longer the recompose operation does than a refresh. So users can usually expect anywhere from 15 minutes on a really slim image to as much as 30 minutes or more, depending on the speed of your SAN and how large your image is, because it's got to do that full clone replica, and then also whether or not I'm storing my replica in a single location or if I've got it across multiple data stores. If I've got it across multiple data stores, it's got to do a clone operation to each data store. So again, your mileage may vary, but expect a lot more time for a recompose operation to take place. So typically something this is going to be done after hours. And again, local mode desktops are only updated if they are checked in. Some of the use cases for this, right? Patching Windows or installed software, right? So if I need to add a patch to an application or to Windows itself, Patch Tuesday comes out. Recompose operations are awesome for that, right? So I just fire up my old parent VM, make my patches, install all the Windows patches, reboot, make sure everything works fine in my parent VM, test it all out, create my snapshot, do a recompose operation, and then I'm ready to go with my new patches. It's also a way to do quick deployments or configuration changes. So if I need to add a file to the OS image, I need to modify a script that runs inside of the image, or add a brand new application, any modification of the image itself. It's a way to make a quick configuration change to move forward. And then my favorite aspect of it, I can revert. So I want to make sure I keep enough of my older snapshots so that I can go backwards if I need to, right? So if I did a Patch Tuesday, and all of a sudden I find out, oh man, I didn't test that one application and now it's broken. If I've got my previous snapshot, all I have to do is notify all the users, hey, we're gonna go backwards, do a recompose operation, select the previous snapshot, do a recompose, 20-30 minutes later, bring that back up, users are able to work again. And then I can go back in and do some better testing on why that patch broke that particular application. So you do want to be able to have at least, ideally in my world, I like to have at least 3 or 4 snapshot versions to be able to go back to, and then over time I like to clean that up. So usually about every quarter or so, or every month, I like to go back in and clean up any old snapshots that are lingering around. I may not need to use anymore on the parent VM, but having a couple to be able to go back to is definitely handy in case of these types of situations. Alrighty, then the third R, rebalance. Okay, this essentially allows me to evenly distribute my link clones across the data stores that I have configured. It's not always perfect when it actually goes to lay out the link clones as far as which data stores are utilized and used. So sometimes you're going to get one data store that may be a little higher loaded with the link clone Delta disks than another. So because of that, the rebalance operation allows me to have a little bit better balance of I/O, right, and utilization of my space. So that it kind of like DRS does for us in a vSphere cluster where it's trying to balance out memory and CPU. This is a way to be able to balance out the load of I/O and balance out those space constraints. It's not doing it on real time. It doesn't have a real fancy algorithm that's doing that, so you're not really getting true balance of I/O, but you're getting a better shot at it. So it gives you something. It's better than nothing. So again, like the others, this can be scheduled or on demand, so I can have this rebalance operation run on a scheduled service, or I can actually just on demand go through a rebalance operation on the entire pool. Now, users need to be logged off for this operation to actually happen, and because of that, it's performing a refresh of the desktop. So essentially, you're getting a refresh when you do a rebalance. So you get both at the same time, just like on a recompose, I'm getting a refresh essentially as well. So because of that, our users need to be able to be logged off in that case. So the use cases for this, right, it's pretty straightforward, right? I want to relevel data stores after adding a new data store to a pool, right? So if I get some more space on my SAN, I add another data store to my pool to be able to start utilizing it. It's not going to just start utilizing just that data store. It'll continue to use my existing data stores and the new data store, so they'll be unbalanced, right? So if I want to get them balanced out, then I'm going to need to run a rebalance operation across them. Also allows me to readjust the usage of the data stores, right? If I want to change the overcommit level settings on those data stores. So remember back in the pool settings where we had the options for conservative or aggressive or none, when it comes to how aggressive we want to actually load up link clones onto a particular data store. If I change any of those values, that's not going to necessarily really take effect until I've done a rebalance. So you'll want to make sure you come back and revisit that. So let's look at editing pools now. So first of all, when we look at editing pools, we have the option to adjust the pool size, right? So I can change how many desktops I want to be able to have inside of this pool, more or less, whatever I need. So as I look over time and I see what my pool settings are and how my utilization is, if it's in growth mode or just the opposite, if we're cutting back workforce, I'm able to slim down the pool size or expand it on the fly as I need to. For a manual pool, I can add or remove desktops, right? So I can go in and actually get those desktops in or out of there. I can also enable or disable a pool. So this is kind of handy if I'm going to want to actually have some operations going on, I can actually disable that pool from use. So that way users can't actually access the pool. Or I can re-enable it as well. Same type of operation, just on the provisioning side of things. I can also enable or disable provisioning. So if I'm having a problem with my pool, for some reason Composer is not working properly, or I'm getting some errors during provisioning, but I already have some existing desktops that are working and functional, and those users are on there, I can just disable provisioning for that pool. And what that'll essentially do is stop the pool from trying to create more desktops, and I can fix whatever the problem is without impacting the existing users that are already utilizing the pool. So all the different pool settings I'm able to actually go back in and modify, with a few exceptions. One is the pool type. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? I can't go modifying a floating pool and turn it into a manual pool, or vice versa, or persistent to a non-persistent. So those types of things, those decisions that are made, I need to stick with and go. So if I need to make changes into that, I'm looking at creating a brand new pool and migrating users over to the new pool. So the other one is the pool ID, right? We need to have some type of key or ID that's based on that pool that makes it unique. So we can't go modifying that particular aspect of it. The usage of persistent or disposable disks, that's a one-time decision. So as I'm going through looking at my pool design, when I first go to lay that out, those are the things I need to make sure that I'm good for. And if I need to make modifications to that, I'm looking at creating a brand new pool and then migrating users there to the new pool with those particular characteristics. And then whether or not I'm using quick prep or sysprep. So I need to make that choice ahead of time as well. And once I've made that decision to go that route, again, I'm stuck in that route until I decide to create a brand new pool. So when we're looking at managing user sessions, one of the things we can do is disconnect a session, right? So if we see a particular session that we don't want to have running, we have the option of disconnecting the user from that session. So the session does remain active and the user can reconnect. So what essentially has happened in that case is I've just severed their connection to the session, but the session is still running. So any of their applications or that virtual machine, it's still running, and they have the option of connecting back into that session. It's just, I've just severed that session before there. So the user's logged off if the automatically log off after disconnect is enabled. So if I have that setting set in my pool, oops, it's their session is logged off. And depending on other settings, things like if I have automatically refreshed the desktop after log off, I can have a cascading effect depending on what settings I put into the pool. So I just need to be aware of that when I'm going in to disconnect a user session. I need to know what the impact is going to be to that user, right? Is it just going to disconnect their session and allow them to connect back in, or is it going to disconnect their session and log them off, and essentially they may lose their work and what they were working on, and potentially, it could also log them off and do a refresh of their desktop. So depending on what I've set in my pool settings, I need to be aware of what's going to happen and how that's going to impact that user and how that will impact troubleshooting, right? So I may need to disable something like refresh of the desktop after log off, or not automatically log off after disconnect if I'm wanting to do some troubleshooting on that particular desktop. So just be aware of that. So I can log off the session, right? So this does two things, right? So this severs the connection like it did in disconnect the session, and it also logs off the user session. Now reset, it's kind of like what it says. Some of you may remember some of our older PC systems, they had a reset button as well as a power button. That's exactly what this is, right? This is a non-graceful power cycle of the desktop. So clicking the reset button will get your system to reboot, but it's not clean, right? So the user is going to be disconnected. Whatever they had, nothing that was in memory is not flushed and written to disk. It's just boom, right? It's kind of like having the rug pulled out from under the operating system. So not exactly the way you want to go unless you're just having issues and you can't get the system to reboot cleanly from any other way. And then finally we have send a message, right? We have an option to display a message on the user's desktop. So this can be handy before we actually go to reset their session, log them off, or disconnect them. We may want to have some communication with the end user to let them know what's going on. So, pick up the phone. Obviously that'll work, but this is a nice quick way to have them see something right on their desktop in order to be able to know what's going on. But do make sure you're communicating with your end users, because really end user experience is key when it comes to stuff like this, and that's the key to making them happy and making sure that they know you care and you're actually there on their team and not just some guy, big brother in the background doing stuff to their sessions. Right, and let's now go into a demonstration of how to maintain our desktop pools. So from here, I've logged into the VMware View Administrator, and we're at our Startup Dashboard screen. And I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the Pools section. So from the Pools section, you can see that we currently have two pools that have already been created. One, which is a floating automated pool, and the other, which is a dedicated automated pool. So I'm going to come in here to the purchaser's pool and show you how to go about entitling this pool for application use so that users can actually access this. So by default, it's already entitled. So I'm going to actually go in here really quick and remove the current entitlement. And I'm going to show you what happens when Jane goes to log on and accesses her view client. So she's going to connect into the connection server. And with her super secret password, we'll connect. And we're going to see that she only has access to one of the pools, the administrator pool, and not to the purchaser's pool, which she does need access to. So notice she only has access to the one. So we're going to go ahead and exit here. And we're going to come back into the purchaser's pool, and we're going to select entitlements. Notice by default, when you create a pool, this is how it's going to show up. It'll be enabled, but not entitled. So click on the entitlements window, and then you can add a user or group to be able to entitle to this particular pool. Now, while for smaller environments, individual users entitled to a single pool or multiple pools may be okay, but as you start to grow and scale, you definitely want to start using groups in order to make your entitlements a lot easier for you. So we're going to go ahead and use the view users and the view administrators, and I'm going to entitle both of those groups to this particular pool. And we'll select OK. And with that, we now see that it's now checkmark has been entitled. And we'll come back to our view client now. And we'll connect in. And again, log in as Jane with her super secret password. And you'll now see that Jane has access to the purchaser automated dedicated pool. So we're going to go ahead and actually connect her into that pool. Now that she's connected in, we'll take a look at her system. So it's pretty barren. There's not a whole lot here other than the default setup for Windows. And what I'm going to do right now is, we've taken a look at in the previous, in this lesson here, a look at the 3 R's, the refresh, the recompose, and the rebalance operations. So right now we're going to take a look at the refresh operation. So because this is an automated dedicated pool, we have all of the user profile being redirected to a separate persistent data disk for this particular user. So when she logs in, all of her profile data will be saved and kept on that particular disk drive for her. But on the C drive, if we ever go back and do a refresh operation, what effectively will happen is that C drive will get reset back to defaults. And just to show you that that's truly what does happen, I'm going to create a new folder here called test123. And inside of that folder, we're just going to create a new WordPad document. And I'm going to open it up and put in some random text there. And we'll save that WordPad document. So now we have this document in the folders test123 underneath the C drive. Now, as I made mention before, anything that's written to the C drive, and this typically includes things like temporary log files, a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily need. But there may be the occasion where there's something that is actually written to the actual C drive itself in that particular folder. So we need to be careful of this, and we need to make sure that our applications don't function in this manner, or that we've at least tested our applications to ensure that they're writing to a user profile or to a network drive or to some other persistent area of the disk. Because what's going to happen now is we're going to come back, and if all works as planned, we're going to do a refresh on Jane's desktop here, and this folder and file should go away and should be back to just as it was when we first logged on to it. So we're going to go ahead and log off. Actually, I'm going to leave this running here just so we can, after we're logged off. And let's go into the actual purchasers pool. And we're going to click on the inventory tab. Now there's 2 ways to do refreshes, recompose, and rebalances. One can be done at the global level. So on the settings tab within the pool, I can come here to the view composer settings and do a refresh, a recompose, or a rebalance. I can also do them on an individual level if I just need to refresh, recompose, or rebalance a single desktop. So in this case, I'm going to look at these desktops here, and let's see which one Jane picked up. Okay, so Jane is on purchase app 01. So I can highlight this individual virtual desktop here, come up to the view composer option, and then I'm going to say refresh. So if you'll notice right now, there is no task running for this VM. So let's click the refresh option. Okay, it's going to happen immediately. We're going to force the users to log off. We don't want to wait because we might be waiting a long time. We'll stop at any errors, and it's going to display the default warning message that's set in the global settings area. So that's a log off time of 5 minutes. So we'll go ahead and click next and finish. And now you'll notice under the task operation here for this virtual machine, it's now set to refresh. And if we come back to the desktop here, this is Jane's desktop, and she's going to get a message in just a little while about having to log off, and she'll have 5 minutes to be able to save her work before she's forced to automatically log off her desktop. All right, and there's our message. It says your desktop is scheduled for an important update and will be restarted in 5 minutes. Please save any unsaved work now. And we can go ahead and click OK and go ahead and log her off. And then I'm going to come back over to my Virtual Center screen. And we'll watch the task list in the Virtual Center to see what happens as we go through the refresh. All right, and you'll notice now that it's reverted back to its original snapshot. So the Purchase AP01 VM has now gone back through and is in the process of being refreshed back to its original state. So let's come back to our View Administrator screen. And we'll click refresh here, and you'll notice the task now is now set to none instead of refresh. And the state is in a state of provisioned. And what we will do is go ahead and come back to our View client. Connect back in as Jane again. And we'll connect her to the purchaser pool again. Alright, and now we're connecting back into her desktop. And if we go ahead and look and open up Windows Explorer here, and we navigate to the C drive, you'll notice there's no test 123 folder, and obviously no file in that subdirectory. So our refresh happened as it was supposed to, reset the C drive back to the defaults, but all of our personal data under the persistent disk has been saved and kept safe. So we'll go ahead and log her off there now. So now with that, I'd also like to go through another operation, the recompose. So for the recompose, I'm going to actually do this back at the global level because I want this to happen for the entire pool, not just an individual desktop. So I'm going to go to View Composer and Recompose. And what I'm going to essentially do is, if you'll notice in our settings down here, we currently are connected to the View XP Parent 01 image and the Post VM Optimizations snapshot of that image. Now what I've done in the background is I've went ahead and installed OpenOffice.org onto the View XP Parent 01 virtual desktop. And then I created a new snapshot with the OpenOffice.org changes in it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take View Composer and recompose this entire pool. And we're not going to be changing the parent VM, although we could do that as an option. But right now we're just purely going to be changing to the OpenOffice suite. So this allows us, this desktop, which was pretty barren at the initial install, this allows us to be able to add applications, add updates to applications or to the operating system fairly quickly. Because now all we're going to have to do is just select the new snapshot with the changes that we've made, click Next, and you'll notice that it's going to change the default image for any new desktops that get deployed off of this image. And very similar to the the refresh operation, we're also going to force the users to log off. We're going to stop at any errors, and it's going to give us our default time of 5 minutes to give them time to log off. So we'll go ahead and click Next, and we'll click Finish, and that will submit the job into operation. All right. And while it's doing that, we're going to take a look again at our tasks area within Virtual Center, and we're going to see what's happening in the Virtual Center area, so you get to see the different operations that are taking place. All right, you'll notice that both of the VMs, App01 and App02, have reverted their snapshots and removed any existing snapshots. And now the main thing that's happening right now, the clone virtual machine task, is taking the new snapshot that we have based on the OpenOffice.org install and is creating a brand new replica, and it's cloning from the View XP Parent VM to create a brand new read-only replica for us to use for all of our individual virtual machine disks that will be link clones off of that replica. So it's going to take a little while for it to do the copy of the replica. And then once it does that, we'll see it actually creating the link clones off of that. And then the operation will be complete. All right, and now we'll notice it has finished cloning the replica. And now it's actually reconfiguring each of the individual virtual machines. And will create new snapshots for each one of those virtual machines as well, so that they can become the full link clones that they need to be. Now let's head back to our purchaser pool here. We'll take a look at the inventory. And you'll notice that both of those VMs, while they were going through the recompose process, have been placed into maintenance mode. Let's do a quick refresh on those. So now they are out of maintenance mode, but they are in the process of customizing. So each one of those virtual machines is in the process of going through quick prep and getting its customized, individualized settings via the quick prep process. We'll need to wait just a little bit longer before we're able to log back in to the virtual machine. Now you see that one of our status of our desktops has changed to provisioning. And the other one will be coming up online here shortly. So while that's the case, let's go ahead and log into Change Desktop there and take a look at the changes that have been made. So we'll log back in with the VMware View client and log in again with our super secret password. And now this new application that Jane needed for her desktop, because when she logged in initially, right, we didn't have any real applications to use or utilize, but within literally less than 30 minutes, Jane's able to get a whole new application deployed to her system and ready for her to use. Now, of course, your mileage may vary. Obviously, the deployment time is going to depend on the process of how many desktops that you're actually deploying off of a single pool, the IOP availability of your SAN, whether or not you're using SSD or SATA disk, or in my case, you're using the iOmega iX200 filer. So lots of variances there depending on the speed of your SAN and how the configuration of your desktops are put together. But this is something that's really advantageous for administrators from a real operational expense perspective, savings. And this tends to be one of the things that I usually, as the selling point for View over and over again, because sometimes the CapEx costs are pretty, one way or another, it's about the same cost of doing a regular desktop versus a virtual desktop. Sometimes more depending on the environment. But the operational expense savings that you can gain from this, from being able to add applications, update applications, revert back from failed applications, is humongous and there's no parallel to it in the physical desktop realm. You only get these types of operations within the virtual desktop arena. All right, we're logged on again now, and you'll notice we now have an OpenOffice org shortcut. We can go ahead and launch that application. It's going to walk us through an introductory wizard where we just supply our information. We're not going to check for updates automatically. And we don't want to register. And now here we have our OpenOffice.org suite. We can have a text document, word processor, spreadsheet, presentation formats, all kinds of awesome stuff right here and available to us. And like I said, in less than 30 minutes. Now that's quick deployment time right there. So let's go ahead and log off here from Jane's session. Alrighty. We come back here to our pools. Now with that, we've seen a chance how to do a refresh. We've seen a chance on how to do a recompose. The same procedure is in place for doing a rebalance, whether from an individual VM's perspective, by clicking on the VM and choosing rebalance as the operation, or doing that at the pool level by coming to settings and then coming to view composer and choosing rebalance. Now with the rebalance operation, you are going to go ahead and get a refresh as part of that to your desktops. I'm not going to actually be doing this with my system here because I'm currently only on one piece of storage. So I'm only using one data store, so there's no sense in utilizing rebalance. There's nothing to rebalance in my case. You need to have multiple data stores connected for that. But what we are going to do is actually, let's close Jane's session down a little too quickly. Let's get her connected back in here real quick. Because what I wanted to show you next is how to look at the different sessions when users are connected. So there goes Jane. She's connected again back to her desktop. And we can come underneath the remote sessions, underneath monitoring, to look at that. And there is our user, Jane, in the purchaser pool. And it's showing all the information about this particular session. So with this session, we have a couple of different options with this. We can send a message. So we can just say, "Hi, Jane." And we can say what type of information it is, right? So it can be just an informational message, a warning message, or an error message to let Jane know the criticality. And we can say, "Okay." And if we go back to our session over here, there's our little informational bubble. Otherwise, you would have gotten a warning or an error bubble here as well. There's Jane's message. Now we can also disconnect her session, which will leave the session running, but just disconnect the actual session between the user and the client. Or we have the option of logging off the session, which will just log her off the virtual machine completely. Or reset the virtual machine, which is like I had mentioned before. That's like pressing that little reset button on your one of your older PCs. It's like pulling the rug right from up under the operating system, right? That turns off the power, switches the power back on, and the operating system didn't know what in the world had happened to it. So it didn't have a chance to flush its buffers or write anything out to disk. So not this kind of your last resort option here in resetting the virtual machine. But let's go ahead and disconnect this session. Okay. So right now the session state is currently set as connected. And now it's changed to disconnected. And you notice I don't have the client in my taskbar any longer. So I could just reconnect with the client and it would come back on with our session and applications running as they were. But in this case, now that we've disconnected, we only have two other options, right? To reset the virtual machine or log off. So we're going to go ahead and log off Jane. That way her session isn't continuously running and taking up CPU cycles that don't need to be done. And like the last one, it may take a minute or two, but it will go ahead and log off Jane's session there. So with that, let's go ahead and actually come back to pools again real quick. And I want to show you a little bit about how to edit or disable certain statuses for a pool. So if we click on a pool, we can look at the two types of pool status that are available. The provisioning status of the pool and the whether or not the pool is enabled at all. So if I disable a pool, which I can do by clicking on that and saying OK, you'll notice that the check mark goes away from the enabled status for purchaser. And if I try and log Jane back in again to the purchaser pool, and we connect, she no longer has the purchaser pool showing up for her. So we'll go ahead and click exit here. We'll come back to this pool, and we're going to edit this pool because we want to change the amount of desktops that we currently have available. So in our case scenario, say we had a couple of other people coming on to our particular purchaser department, and they needed to have access to the pool here. So if we look under the provisioning settings here, right now provisioning is enabled. I'm going to uncheck that box just for the moment. And I'm going to change the maximum number of desktops that we want. So I'm going to say, you know what? Let's have 4 desktops for this pool to accommodate the 2 new users that are coming on there. And I now want, instead of 1 powered on spare, I want to be able to have at least 2 powered on spare desktops. And I'm going to click OK to make these changes happen. But you'll notice, because I've disabled provisioning by unchecking the box there, nothing's going to happen. So I've made those changes to the pool, but the pool is still not enabled. The checkbox is not there as well. And if we come back to our status here, you'll notice that enable pool and enable provisioning are both an option because I unchecked the box for enabled provisioning. And so nothing's going on. So let's go ahead and enable provisioning. Okay. And with that, if we come back to Virtual Center here now, in just a minute, we're going to see Virtual Center kick off a couple of other creations of new link clones for that pool. I've come back to the pool here now and went ahead while we were waiting for that, enable the pool as well. So I've changed the status of the pool for enabling the pool and enabling the provisioning. And if you'll notice as well here, come back to Virtual Center, and it has gone through and created App 3 and App 04. And if we come back and look at the pool, and look at the inventory of that pool, we now have 2 more desktops that are going through the customization process as we speak, and don't yet have users assigned to those. So as we have those new 2 users come on board, they'll be able to hop right on to those 2 new pools that have just been created. So what did we cover today? So we looked at user entitlements and how we need to do that first after we've created the pool before we're ever able to have people access that pool. We need to make sure that those are in place. And what type of restrictions we can place on pools coming in over certain Vue connection servers. We also looked at the 3 R's, right? The composer operations, refresh, recompose, and rebalance. What they do, when particular use cases for when you might want to use those. How we can go back and edit our pools and more carefully what those particular settings are that we can't edit after the fact, and we have to make sure we've made good design decisions on the upfront, or we create new pools in order to take care of that. Then we also looked at managing user sessions and then how that's actually going to play out. And then finally, we took a look at desktop pool management demonstration and how that looks within the actual lab environment itself. So thanks so much for having some time with me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next lesson.